Hello and welcome. I'm Exolite and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about some of the most evil doctors of the last 2 centuries. Before we get started, if you would please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. It helps me to be seen. It helps me to be recommended to other viewers. If you are not already and you would like to be, please subscribe. That also really helps my channel. And it's important, especially now, because the 31 days of Halloween is almost here, and I'll have content every single day, and you'll be notified every time my content goes live. All right, let's talk about these doctors, shall we? Let's talk about the mob doctor, shall we? Morris Bulber. Dr. Bulber was part of the infamous Philadelphia poison ring, which was led by Italian immigrant cousins Herman and Paul Petrillo in the 1930s. The cousins had contracts in the criminal world. Harold was an expert counterfeiter and arsonist, while Paul ran an insurance scam business from the back of his tailor shop. Dr. Bulber was a Russian Jewish immigrant who subscribed to the La Futura, which is magic, and it was believed by many South Philadelphian Italians at the time. When the Petrillos aspired to La Futura, they recruited the help of the good doctor. The doctor would frequently give potions to patients to better their lives. The cousins started issuing insurance policies without medical exams and then would pay the doctor to poison them with his potions, which contained arsenic. The insurance policies were made out to the gang rather than the wives who had been widowed. They also hired killers who murdered others through various means, such as drowning, bludgeoning, and running over the victims by car. The murders began in 1931, and an estimated 30 to 50 people were killed. Dr. Bulber was arrested in 1939 and turned state's evidence against the cousins, who were then sentenced to death. Linda Burfield Hazard. Dr. Hazard was not actually a medical doctor, but she did receive a license to practice medicine through a loophole, the grandfathered practitioners of alternative medicine under the regulations of the state of Washington. The doctor was a well-known advocate of fasting and wrote 2 books on the subject. The first one, Fasting for the Cure of Disease, and Scientific Fasting, the Ancient and Modern Key to Health. She believed all illnesses were the result of excess eating. She created her own sanitarium, where inpatients were fasting for days, weeks, and months on small amounts of tomato and asparagus juice and an occasional teaspoon of orange juice. The patients were also given daily enemas as well as massages, and the nurses said that the massages sounded more like beatings. Under her care, 40 patients died. She claimed that they died of previously undiagnosed conditions, while others stated that the cause was starvation, which, obviously. In fact, locals called her place Starvation Heights. In 1912, she was convicted of manslaughter for the death of a wealthy British woman who weighed less than 50 pounds at the time of her death. It was then that her possible true motive was discovered. Hazard had forged the woman's will to make herself the beneficiary, as well as stole all the patient's valuables. Along with her husband, she gained power of attorney over the patients, sometimes by declaring them mentally incompetent, and took over their estates. She was sentenced to hard labor at the penitentiary of Walla Walla, but was pardoned only 2 years later for unknown reasons. She moved to New Zealand, and with her husband, she practiced as a dietitian and osteopath. Her license there was soon revoked for practicing without the appropriate credentials. She died in 1935, and in an irony, the son of one of her victims went on to establish a successful seafood restaurant in Seattle. Thomas Neal Cream. Dr. Cream first started practicing medicine in Chicago. In 1881, several patients died, including Daniel Slott, who was found to have died from strychnine poisoning after a supposed remedy for his epilepsy. Slott's wife was the mistress of Dr. Cream, who subsequently turned state evidence on the doctor. She confessed that she supplied Cream with the poison to kill her own husband. Cream was sentenced to life in prison in Joliet, but was released in 1891 after his brother bribed the authorities. Cream then moved to London and resided on Lambeth Palace Road. Several prostitutes soon died of strychnine poisoning after Cream gave them a drink. Cream then went on to write a letter to another doctor accusing him of poisoning one of the victims and demanding money from him. In another case, he wrote a letter to the coroner offering to name the murderer. Police at Scotland Yard soon became suspicious of him and put him under surveillance. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. At his execution, his last words were, "I am Jack the..." Speculation arose that he was Jack the Ripper, although he had been in prison at the time of those murders. Dr. Bodkin Adams was a general practitioner in the British community of Essex. He was considered compassionate, especially to his elderly patients. However, it was also noted that he liked to use dangerous drugs and expressed an abnormal interest in his patients' wills. In 1956, police began investigating Dr. Adams under suspicion that he was murdering his elderly patients to acquire their inheritance. Although they found dozens of suspicious cases, they charged him for only 2. The patients had willed large sums of money to Dr. Adams, and the causes of their death were not clear. Ultimately, Adams was not convicted of those deaths, but found guilty of forging prescriptions and falsifying medical forms. He was even eventually able to reopen his practice, but many of his elderly patients decided to leave him. His case had a significant impact on criminal trials in England. Perhaps our most famous doctor is H.H. Holmes. Holmes was America's first known serial killer. His fascination with medicine was evident from childhood, when he would perform, quote, surgeries on animals. It has also been speculated that he killed his childhood best friend. After finishing medical school, he took a job as a pharmacist in Chicago. He soon started killing people to steal their property. Then he built himself a house that is now known as Murder Castle. It was equipped with secret passages, trapdoors, soundproof rooms, doors that locked from the outside, gas jets to asphyxiate his victims, and a kiln to cremate the bodies. During the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, Holmes became friendly to many different women. He gained control of their finances, and then he murdered them. Additionally, he required all of his employees to take out life insurance policies, naming him as the beneficiary. Many of the bodies were sold to medical schools. In 1893, he was arrested for insurance fraud for a fire in his home. Eventually, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. The exact number of his victims is unknown, but some estimate it to be over 200 people. And our last one for the day, the man known as Dr. Satan. Marcel Petois. As a child, Petois was seen to be highly intelligent, although exhibiting some rather abnormal behavior. In fact, he was expelled several times from school. By the age of 17, he was arrested for mail fraud, but found mentally unfit to stand trial. So he joined the army, and they accepted him. The army discharged him eventually because he was found to be stealing blankets. They deemed him insane. But being an overachiever, Eventually, he was able to earn a medical degree, and in 1921, he started to practice in France. He became the mayor in 1926, but was suspended more than once. 2 of his patients were murdered, but he was never charged. He lost his seat after he was found stealing power from the city. In 1933, he moved to Paris, where he soon developed a good reputation as a doctor while he continued his crimes. When World War II struck, he came up with a plan to enrich himself. He offered to help the Jews wishing to escape Nazi-occupied France. He did this by injecting them with poison and telling them it was medicine to protect them against disease. After he watched them slowly die, he stole their money and their valuables and placed their bodies in a furnace in the basement of his specially soundproofed home. In 1943, he was arrested by the Gestapo but released after several months. After the liberation of Paris in 1944, he was arrested yet again, and 36 corpses were found in his basement. He admitted to killing at least 60 people and was convicted for 26 murders. He was guillotined in 1946. That's the end for today. However, if you enjoyed this in I don't know if enjoy is the right word, it's a strange way, I'm going to have some more Doctors of Evil in the 31 Days of Halloween lineup. So be sure to come back because they only get worse. Thank you for coming, and good night.